Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Wilson, and welcome back to my new video series, The Power of Storytelling. In each episode, I invite a guest to share stories that will help us understand discrimination and inequality in order that we all might learn and grow. I know this series is still in its infancy, but already I felt so humbled by the outreach and comments from friends, colleagues, and from people outside my network. I hope through the video series that you walk away inspired by some incredible people and feel equipped with some resources to help you lead your own transformational storytelling conversations. So let's dive in. Today, I'm thrilled to invite my next storytelling guest, my colleague, Deepshikha Dutt. Deep is a partner at Dentons Canada and is building a name for herself as a commercial and civil litigator, having appeared before all levels of court and administrative tribunals. She also runs an active alternative dispute resolution practice. Inside and outside Dentons, Deep is an outspoken proponent of the advancement of women and people of color. She is co-lead of our Toronto office's Inclusion and Diversity Committee and regularly speaks about issues around racism, discrimination, and how underrepresented groups can enter the legal industry. Deep, I am thrilled to have you here, so welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Beth. It's an honor and a pleasure.
So Deep, you joined the Dentons Partnership, I guess about 2 years ago. And as you've developed in your career, have had the opportunity to learn a lot about the legal profession. So tell us about your observations thus far in terms of encouraging inclusion and diversity in the legal profession. And what are some of the key issues that you and your peers talk about?
I think since I started at Dentons and having become partner at Dentons, we have really moved the dial on inclusion and diversity. Even in my 8 years here, it has gone from strength to strength. And especially during this summer, some of the obviously things came to the forefront with acts in the US, such overt acts of racism that led everyone to think about where they stand in their journey of inclusion and diversity and take stock of that. So I think that really brought everyone together in this inclusion and diversity fight for equality. And some of the things that I think we talk about uh, now about inclusion and diversity, it sort of is all over the spectrum. One, we can't believe we're still talking about creating inclusion and diversity. Two, I think we are glad we are talking about inclusion and diversity because the first and foremost thing that you need to do is acknowledge the problem. Without really acknowledging the problem and understanding what issues you are trying to fix, you can't really fix them. And so I think everybody really, really appreciates the fact that we acknowledge it and not just people like me or even you. You've been a woman, which is in itself a journey in all professional fields. But everyone, our senior male leaders, people of all color and backgrounds are acknowledging the problem, which I think is the great first step. They're listening, which is, I think, the next step. And I think what we as a group hope for is that that listening and learning will slowly and steadily turn into action and create an environment where we can all have equal opportunities. We'll never have equal successes, but it's about equal opportunities in our workplace where everyone has an opportunity to make a career that they want to make, which is, I think, one of the key things. Mentorship, I think, is one of the biggest things that everybody is talking about amongst our peer group. That even because we can't have mentors of all kinds within our firm, so creating a mentorship environment, whether it's internally and externally, I think is something that everyone is talking about. And I know we all are doing our best to create that structure and develop mentorship through client work and internal folks. So I think that's one of the key things that everyone is talking about. Yeah, so.
And Deep, I've seen that one of the things I've noticed in the legal industry, anyhow, is that our clients are putting pressure on us, right, in terms of demanding evidence of inclusion and diversity. Any thoughts on that front?
Yes. So I think clients have been asking us to have diverse work teams for a long time. The business case of having a diverse team, that already exists. There is ample amount of data, and I don't think there is any disagreement in the industry about that. It is how do we go about achieving that diverse business team? And I think that is what our clients are asking of us, and now asking for accountability on those issues. So I think our clients are looking, because what happens is now clients are also lawyers who were in private practice. They were in private practice, who left private practice and went in-house. They're also climbing the ranks of leadership in-house. So my peers who were practicing, whether at Dentons or other places, are now in-house. And what mostly those clients are, in fact, people of color and women. And so because they are in leadership positions now, they know, one, how we work internally, and that when they give a file, for example, yes, it may be a senior male white partner who is being given that file, but they also know that much of that work is being done by juniors on that file. So they acknowledge that. So they know that when they're asking for accountability and diverse work teams, how beneficial that is, because having been in those positions, they know that the actual work is being done by those diverse teams behind the scenes. And so not only are they demanding that there be equality in work teams, but also accountability to ensure that when work is done, there are diverse viewpoints that are looking at things. Just an example that I can think of most recently, I was leading a file, and one of the clients sort of challenged my viewpoint based on the fact that maybe this is how things were done where I was from, to somehow suggest that my legal opinion may not hold as much value because I may not be a Canadian looking person. And I was able to not only talk about myself, but and justify my expertise, but my seniors and white male partners were able to do that for me as well. And when they did it, it adds another layer of credibility. And in fact, not only the client then took internal action for comments that were made, but we recently won that decision, which justified all of what I was saying. And then I just got an email literally 10 minutes ago from the client's GC outlining how impressed they were. And so that's the kind, I think, of accountability that clients are holding themselves to, and also asking that law firms hold themselves to.
It's interesting. Deep, first of all, I'm sorry that such a fabulous colleague that you are, such an amazing professional that you are, have had an experience like that. And I know it's not the only experience that you've had. And I want to come back to that. But you also touched on what I think is a really interesting example of allyship and what that can look like in practice, right? When it really counts, which is leveraging that network of others you're working with who may be senior white men, or probably mostly are senior white men, to really credentialize you in the room. And so important that they stepped in at that moment and did that. So just building off that story, clearly racialized professionals have very different experiences in corporate Canada versus those who are white. What do you think racism looks like in corporate Canada, and how do you respond?
So I came to Canada in 2009, and I joined Dentons in 2011. I never faced any overt act of racism. I'd say any time ever up until I'd say a year and a half. And so, which is interesting as I look back and reflect on it, because when I think of, well, what racism looks like in corporate Canada, I never thought about that until quite recently. Yes, I realize that there aren't people who look like me in positions of leadership, or I have to work perhaps twice as hard to prove the fact that I can do the same amount of work, because there is no implied trust that comes with looking like me or coming from a foreign country and being a foreign trained lawyer and then coming to Bay Street. So you have to work hard and prove your worth. Whereas maybe for a white male person who is my peer and did his law from a local Canadian school, that trust is already implied, and they have to make a mistake to lose that trust. Whereas for me, I have to do 10 things right to gain that trust. So I think that's probably the basic struggle of being a person of minority and also a foreign trained lawyer. But I never really held any of that sort of in the bucket of racism, or how that may impact my corporate journey and leadership journey. But I think as I started getting into positions of leadership and becoming the face of files and taking on more frontline roles, I sort of felt that is when I found bigger pushback. Because when you're a first year associate and you're in a file, it's easy to get lost in the background, and the male white partner take the lead on. So there aren't that many sort of opportunities to face any kind of overt racism in corporate Canada. But when you are the face of the file, when you are the partner on the file, I think there are more opportunities on the front lines. So I can think of one example where I was cross-examining, and my client was being cross-examined by the other side. And the lawyer on the other side started sort of mimicking my accent to make fun of the way I was speaking. And so it took me a second to stop him and call out the fact that he was being racist. I said, well, I'll state it on the record that this is inappropriate and you're being racist and you need to stop. I think he was taken aback. He stopped, we went off the record. He sort of half-heartedly apologized and was like, this is not what I meant, but this is how you were talking. I was like, well, it doesn't really matter how I was talking. Your question was inappropriate and I was objecting to the question. And so I think as you take on more leadership roles, you see more impediments and more situations like that, because there may be more people who are associates who look like me, but there are definitely less people who are partners and leaders who look like me. So it's easy to accept people who are like me in lesser roles than leadership roles. So I think that is one of the biggest issues that we're facing in corporate Canada, changing the face of the leadership of the executive and the management, and creating an environment which is safe for everyone to develop and grow.
Deep, it's almost like the glass ceiling, right, analogy that we refer to, except different. And again, first of all, what an awful experience, and I'm sure deeply offensive on a number of ways. But thank you for sharing this story, because to me that story is one of courage, to stop. I'm sure you had to take a deep breath before you did that. But I hope in sharing your stories that it will inspire others to have the courage as well, to have that confidence in themselves, and that that what happened was wrong, and to stop and call it out for what it is. So I really appreciate you sharing that story as well. And so I guess sort of segue a little bit into my next question. What is your advice for people who maybe aren't ready to take an action like the one that you took there, or aren't ready to lodge a complaint, that just don't feel that they quite have that courage yet, or in a position where they could do that? How can they help friends? And then maybe that's where you really need to turn to allies, right? So how can they help friends and colleagues on their journeys to become better allies in a way that's meaningful and impactful.
Um, and the courage to sort of speak out on things like that comes with time in any event, right? Like when I probably wouldn't have been able to say that in my first year, or when I was young. You need to develop that confidence first in yourself and your own ability to know that what the other person is saying makes no is just wrong, and you are competent and you know that. So that comes with time. So for sure, I think it lies on people like me now, and people like you and other allies, to create that space for our young folks, whether it's business professionals or whether it is associates or students, so that they don't feel like when they raise something that made them feel uncomfortable, that will be held against them, or that they don't feel if they've raised a complaint, nobody's done anything about it and nobody is being held accountable for it. So it is really up to the allies, like you say. And I truly believe in the saying by Edmund Burke that for evil to succeed, all it needs is good men to stand by and do nothing. So it is really for good folks, right? Like majority, 98% of the people that you, and even more, meet are not racist. They're not people who don't want to provide equal opportunities, or treat you like different, or discriminate. So really it is up to those people to see and say when they see things like this, right? Like to be not just mentors, but sponsors, to prop up people who can't speak for themselves, or who don't have the ability and the confidence to do that, raise their voices, because they are the ones who can create that environment. The problem that we have can't be fixed by people of color or people of minority. The problem has to be fixed by the majority, which is white men and women and men who are in positions of power and in positions to make a difference. So it is really up to them to create a space where it is okay to say something that may be uncomfortable. And I know that they want to, but one thing that sometimes holds them back is, well, I don't know if I'll say the right thing, or if I say something, will the other person take it in a different manner, or maybe I'll not say it properly. But I believe saying nothing is worse than trying to fumble your way through saying the right thing, uh, because indifference is worse than not caring. So I think it is up to allies to do that and create that space and speak up for people who can't speak for themselves. And that is the only way we'll create a space where it is okay for everyone to be involved in everything.
Those are all really good examples that I think illustrate the difference. To your point, most people aren't racist, but they're not necessarily being anti-racist, right? So really, those are great examples that you gave in terms of, I think, helping people understand how do you shift from being not a racist to being anti-racist to being an ally. How do you shift from watching to acting, from listening to acting? And so Deep, lots of talk about being allies for sure these days. If you think about somebody who's just starting out, who's really keen to start to make that personal shift, what advice do you have for somebody who's looking to take the first couple steps towards becoming an ally, to learning how to be a good ally?
I think listening is the first step. Learning is the next step, because even I don't know everything about every culture or every um, uh, you know person of minority and how they may feel. So even I am on the journey to learn to be able to become an ally to folks who are junior to me, or are young and associates. I can think of, for example, LGBTQ folks. That is not my personal journey. And so for me to be an ally to them, I need to listen to the issues that they are facing, need to learn what the history is behind the causes of discrimination for them, where they are in their journey and what kinds of issues they're facing. So listening, learning, and then supporting. I think you just sometimes you just have to make yourself available to them. Like, it's not even doing any big gestures or, you know, making sweeping policy changes, which obviously are necessary, but just making sure that you tell them that they have a support system and then be there to back that up when they need you. So if someone comes to you and they say that they are feeling a certain way or they've experienced something a certain way, don't dismiss it, right? Because you don't know what they're feeling because that's not your journey. So as an ally, it is important to listen, learn, validate, and support. That's what I think the role of an ally is. And then, of course, where there are opportunities to make them grow in their career path, whether it is putting them up as partners, whether it is supporting them and giving them file work, whether it is ensuring that they get equal client time, all those are steps that can be taken to ensure that we as allies are giving equal opportunities to everyone. But least of all, I think not just being dismissive of other person's feeling and experience because you don't know how they feel, I think is one of the crucial first steps for an ally.
I'm going to repeat for our listeners one thing that I just heard you say because it was really quick, but I thought it was terrific, which was listen, learn, validate, support. Did I get those four right? Yeah.
Yes.
Great advice, Deep. Thank you. And so speaking of advice, I always want to leave these conversations with some inspiration for people. So what are some resources that you would recommend for those who want to learn more?
Right now, I'm actually reading A Promised Land by Barack Obama. So every page of that book, and it's more than 700 pages, is an inspiration to how you can be an ally, how you can learn about what someone is going through. And then I personally enjoy, because issues of whether it is racism or inclusiveness can always be very heavy and difficult to discuss. So I enjoy learning about these things through somewhat levity and humor. So I turn to, stand-up comedians or books that are written by comics. So Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, which is a, his personal story about his journey, but really, really through a lens of comedy. I really enjoyed it. It is great reading, but also is very inspiring about his journey. And then a Canadian podcast that I listen to, A Big Story, is a podcast which about journalists going around Canada. And again, they sort of talk about different things and stories that Canadians face, but through a lens of humor. So it makes it an easy listening experience, but yet very, very inspiring and life-changing. So I think those are a couple of things that I do and resources that I turn to when I want to learn more about these issues.
Well, A Promised Land is sitting waiting for my holidays so that I can get through the whole 700 plus pages. But I love the advice in terms of finding some opportunities to do learning and your personal journey through humor. So that's terrific. Thanks for sharing that with us. And Deep, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me today. It was delightful, of course. And I think your stories, through your stories, I've certainly taken away some lessons, and I know our listeners have as well. And those will stick with me for some time. So thank you for your personal efforts to help us at Denton's to learn and grow on our inclusion and diversity journey as allies. And for those who are listening today, please help the conversation by sharing resources in the comments section or within your network, anything that you have found helpful in your journey as an ally or as someone who has your own lived experiences. And I hope you feel inspired to listen, to learn and grow through the power of storytelling. And thank you for listening today.
Thank you so much, Beth.